Okay. Right there. Okay. So last week we were working in the speaking section, and we're going to continue and finish working on the speaking section actually this week. So we're going to be working now on question 4 of the speaking section. We already did the first, the independent question. We did question 2. We did the third one last week. And now we're going to finish with the fourth question of the speaking section. So let's take a look at the fourth question of the speaking section. Okay. So the format for this question is pretty simple. I would say it's the simplest one of them all. What you're going to have to do is basically just listen to an audio file and then summarize it. You will have to listen, in this case, to a university lecture, so a university class, which lasts approximately 2 minutes. So you listen to this lecture, you listen to this class, and after you do that, you will get 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds or 1 minute to summarize the lecture. So you listen to the lecture again, you get the question, 20 seconds to prepare, and 1 minute to speak. So, is that okay so far? Do you have any questions in terms of the format?
One moment, I try. No question, but I want to see the. But this part doesn't have a text, no passage, like the second part of the speaking.
Exactly. No, just the listening.
Okay. 2 minutes. Okay.
Okay, great. So what you need to know in order to answer this question correctly is know the structure of the lecture. The thing is, the lecture that you're going to hear will always have the same structure. Now, how's the structure? In the beginning, during the first 30, 40 seconds, you will hear a short introduction where the professor will talk about the topic of the lecture, the main topic. So what you need to do when you're hearing the introduction is just pay attention. Don't take any notes about the introduction. Just pay attention and listen when you are hearing the introduction. Then what matters the most of this lecture is the professor will break that topic into 2 different subtopics. So you will have 2 different subtopics, and each subtopic will have 1 example. So it could be anything really. For example, if the lecture is about pollution, maybe the two subtopics are going to be two causes of pollution or two effects of pollution, two definitions of the word pollution. It doesn't really matter what, but you will always have two different subtopics, and each subtopic will have its own example. And that's the structure. That's pretty much it. You may have some additional details, but they are not important. Your focus should always be when you're taking notes in catching the two subtopics and the two examples. That's the most important part. So is that okay so far?
Yes, when I want the see the example, but for one in this moment, I am okay.
Okay, great. So yes, we will now see an example, and you are gonna take some notes and pay attention, and we'll talk later about what we hear in the exam. So I'm going to play the lecture now. Here we go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between two products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between two products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between two identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of two major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary, but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about that lecture now. So first of all, can you guys tell me what the lecture was about?
I think it's about the product, the cost of product.
Okay, good. So remember I told you when you're listening to the introduction, I told you not to take any notes. What you're gonna do is after you listen to the lecture, you have the question. And this is the question, it's on your screen. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality. What happens is you will always have the same type of question. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain. Whatever comes after the word explain, that is the topic. In this case, the topic is the two major factors of product quality. That is the topic. That's a great summary or a great title for the topic. And that is what you're going to say when you speak later. But for now, the topic was the two major factors of product quality. So we're gonna write that down in our notes. Topic, two major factors of product quality. Now we said that the professor always breaks down this topic into two. What was the first subtopic? What was the first factor? What was it? What was the first factor?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't understand totally the audio. I'm sorry.
Okay, don't worry about it. Let's hear it one more time for this one, since it's our first time.
Thanks.
Gonna-
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between two products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between two products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between two identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of two major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary, but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Okay. So going back, we said the lecture was about, according to the question, the two major factors of product quality and the role in consumer decision making, right? But let's just say two major factors of product quality. Now, what was the first factor, the first subtopic?
If I'm not wrong, it was reliability.
Exactly, reliability, right? And what is reliability? What was the definition that the professor gives?
The professor gave some examples, right? She said that is when the product is not going to need any repairs, or actually it doesn't have any defects, right? Defects.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly, perfect. The professor actually gives two definitions, right? The first one, when the product does not have any defects, and the second, when it works the way that the consumer expects it to work, right? The way they expect it. Exactly, perfect, thanks. And as we said, you have 2 subtopics and 2 examples. So what was the example that the professor gives for reliability?
Mm, I thought it was about cars.
Exactly, it was about cars.
She said that actually cars don't need, well, they, I don't know how to say it, but the cars are not going to need any kind of repair.
Exactly. Yes, so a car will be reliable when it doesn't need to be repaired too soon after buying it, right? When it doesn't need repairs, great. Anything else you guys want to say here? Okay, so what about the second subtopic, the second factor, what was it?
It was features.
Exactly, features. And what are features?
There are things that make the product more, I don't know, easy to use, probably look more cool, more attractive. Some things like that, right?
Okay. Anything else you guys want to say here for features? Exactly. So they're not necessary, but as Karina says, they make them easier to use, they make them cool, attractive for the consumer. So all of those things are features. Okay, guys, and what examples do we have, or what example do we have for features?
We had the same examples with car, like electric windows, she said.
Exactly. Anything else?
I couldn't listen that part.
Okay. The professor says electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos. Those were the examples. Those are the features in a car. Right now, another thing that the professor also says is that reliability is not the deciding factor anymore. Right? Not the most important thing anymore because everything is reliable now, according to her. So the deciding factor now is features, right? So that's also something that maybe is worth writing. But that's it. As you guys can see, this is the structure that we were talking about, right? You have the topic, which is always going to be in the question after the word explain. You have the 2 subtopics, which are going to be 2 factors, 2 definitions, 2 causes, 2 effects, 2 ways, I don't know, many different things, but there will always be 2, and 2 examples, 1 per subtopic. It's always going to be like this. So you need to organize your notes in this way. You need to be paying attention and looking and trying to catch these elements that you find here. Okay, guys, that's really important. Is this okay? Do you guys have any questions about this so far? About the lecture, its structure, or anything?
I have a question. Always has the similar structure, 2 arguments and 2 exams.
Exactly. Always 2 subtopics and 2 examples. It will always be like this.
And only for I am no, the one question only is a speech. The teacher, really, it's not a conversation. It's only for the second part, speaking the TOEFL, no?
Exactly. No, the third question is also like the second, but it's academic. You read the text first, then you listen to a lecture in the third question. And this is the fourth. right? It's just the lecture.
Yeah. Okay.
And it is just the professor who's going to speak. You won't have any students, anybody else, just the professor. Another thing I forgot is as soon as you hear the professor speak, as usual, write down the pronoun, right? If it was a female professor in this case, so big, huge letter, something that you can see, you will write down she, right? So that you don't forget. Very important as well. Any other question? Nope. Okay, guys, great. So, this is the question, right? Using the points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality. Now, what you have to do, remember that you have preparation time, right? In this case, you have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. And I will say the same as I always say. What you do there depends entirely on you, on what you need to do. You can work on your notes, you can rehearse, you can do nothing if you want, completely up to what you need. But you can do whatever you want because they won't record anything from there. They won't evaluate anything, right? What matters is what you do during your response time. And you have 60 seconds to speak, 60 seconds to answer this question. So here's what we're gonna do. First of all, we're gonna have an introduction, as we always do. So this is our introduction. Now, during your introduction, you should not spend more than 10 seconds. Okay, that's the maximum time that you can spend there, 10 seconds. And what you have to do in your introduction is mention the topic. Now, as I told you before, you don't take any notes from the introduction in the lecture, right? You don't take any notes from the topic. So what you're gonna do here is you're gonna say, the lecture discusses, and then you will read what you have on your screen. You read the question, because that is the topic, right? So the lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality. That's what you need in your introduction. You just read, you don't need to do anything else. The lecture discusses, and then you read what's after the word explained, the two major factors of product quality. And that should take you even less than 10 seconds, okay? So 10 seconds is your limit. Is that okay so far? Any questions about that intro? Okay. Make sure that you don't make a mistake with the word discuss. Many students use the word about after it, but this is incorrect. You don't need to use any preposition after the word discuss. So it's just the lecture discusses the two major factors. I don't say the lecture discusses about, okay? It's not like that. It's not like in Spanish. So careful there. And then what you need to do is summarize the two subtopics and the two examples. The way that you want, but it has to be summarized, right? Because otherwise you won't have enough time. Remember, the lecture is 2 minutes and you have to summarize all of that in one. So you're obviously gonna skip some details. You need to focus on the most important information in summarizing the information. So the things that you need in your response are the things that you always need. You need to first use transition words. So when you go to the first reason, you're gonna say first of all, to start, to begin with, whatever you want. To give the example, you need transitions. So to illustrate, for instance, for example, to exemplify, whatever you want. To move on to the second subtopic, you say furthermore, then, moreover, besides, also, whatever transition you can use. And you need to use reporting verbs because you can't take the credit, right? You're just summarizing what the professor said. These are not your ideas. So you need to say, the professor says that, the professor explains, the professor mentions, the professor describes, the professor defines. Always reporting, right? She says that, she explains, she mentions, she talks about, always with those reporting verbs. And that's it. As long as you have that, then you're good. The way that you can balance your time, the ideal way would be 25 seconds for the first subtopic and its example, and 25 seconds for the second subtopic and its example. Okay, guys? When you have a subtopic, like for example, reliability, you have sometimes definitions, right? It depends. Sometimes it is necessary to mention the definition. In this case, for example, it is, right? Because reliability is not such a common word. So it's important to mention at least one definition of the many that the professor can give. But there are gonna be cases where the subtopic is not, it's not necessary to define it, right? Because it's something that everybody knows. So it's self-explanatory. So you just focus on the example, and this is gonna explain better the definition, the subtopic, right? So this is optional. Only if it's necessary, you can explain the definitions for each subtopic. But if not, then don't worry about it. Okay, guys? You don't need a conclusion. It's not necessary at all. They won't give you any points or anything for that. But of course, if you have extra time, if you have like 10 seconds, you can go with a short conclusion. You can say, in summary, the professor, describes the two major factors that lead the consumer towards one product. Whatever you want, or you just repeat the introduction, right? These are the two major factors of product quality. No problem. Is this okay so far? Any questions now? Okay, guys, then I'm gonna give you a sample response. I'm gonna do it so that you see how I organize my time, the things that I say, the things that I leave behind, and everything else. Okay, so let's go. The lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality and their role in consumer decision-making. First, the professor explains reliability, which is defined as the absence of defects in a product, or when the product works the way that the consumer expects it to work. For instance, the professor gives the examples of cars. She says that a car will be reliable when it works the way it should, and it doesn't need to be repaired too soon after buying the car. She also explains that even though reliability is still important, it is not the deciding factor anymore as it used to be in the past. Then she goes on to explain features, the second factor, which are all of those extra characteristics that a product has that are not necessary but that make a product easier to use or make it cool. To illustrate, she gives the example of cars again, and she mentions air conditioning, stereos, sunroofs, electric windows as examples of features in cars. Right? So that's it. The time that you have is just enough for you to explain the ideas. And obviously, you're going to have to work on accommodating your response to the time. But ideally, you should be trying to make a balance, 25 for each subtopic. The introduction can take you less than 10 seconds, so take advantage of the time. And it's just an example, right? You don't have to do it exactly the same way that I did. In your response, you can make pauses, you can stop to think a little bit, make some mistakes, no problem, right? But the important thing is that you have those elements, that you're careful with your grammar, with your delivery and everything else, and it'll be okay. So, is this okay? Do you guys have questions now that you've also heard my response? No? Okay, great. Then that's it. That's task 4. One thing that I also wanted to say, the topics for this question are exactly the same as for question 3. So you have psychology, biology, and business as the most common ones, 90% of the time. I already explained what these topics are about. So psychology is just our brain, biology, animals and plants, business, marketing, pricing, strategies, advertising, I don't know, designing containers, attracting the consumer, right? And there's also a small percentage of probability that you have something different, that you have art, history, sociobiology, sociology, or anything else. So remember, learn, like, expand your vocabulary on these topics. That's way more important than you would think. Because as you probably noticed, right, in this question, you needed to use some business words. You needed to say consumers, products, items, reliability. Those are business words. So yeah, just make sure that you are careful with your vocabulary, that you're using the appropriate words. And that's about it for this question. What do you think now? No questions, really? Okay. So this was business. Let's now do biology and psychology so that you guys get to see an example of each. And then we're okay. So let's do this one here. Okay, I'm gonna play the lecture. Please take notes, pay attention. You already know what to do. So let's go. Let's listen to this lecture in a psychology class.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
When people are in difficult situations, sometimes they experience feelings of helplessness or psychological pain. So what do? They unconsciously use strategies called defense mechanisms to protect themselves psychologically from their painful emotions. Let's say a woman has a pet dog. She's had this dog for a long time, and he's kept her company and guarded her for years, but one day he runs away. This woman looks everywhere and asks other people if they've seen her dog, but she just can't find him. Now, she feels helpless and sad because she misses her dog, so she'll unconsciously find ways to deal with her painful feelings. One defense mechanism she might use is fantasy. With fantasy, the woman uses her imagination. So, instead of just feeling helpless and sad about her lost dog, she invents a happy story in her mind. She might imagine that a nice family found him and feeds him, and that he's really happy with them. She'll picture the dog playing, running around, having fun. Because of this fantasy, she doesn't have to feel sad about her dog running away. It's a fantasy. It's not real, but it keeps her pain away. Another defense mechanism she might use is what we call sublimation. Sublimation is different from fantasy because sublimation isn't about pretending. It's about turning negative emotions into something useful, practical. So the woman might start a dog training school. That way, by training dogs, perhaps she can help prevent other people's dogs from running away like hers did. In other words, with sublimation as a defense mechanism, the woman redirects her negative feelings about losing her dog into a positive, constructive activity.
Okay. Now the question says, using points and examples from the talk, describe the two defense mechanisms mentioned by the professor. Okay, you will now have 20 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So, is there anyone who would like to try?
Mm. Can I try, please?
Okay, yes, of course. Go ahead, please.
Okay, the lecture discusses defense mechanism. First of all, the professor explained about how people react in difficult situations. The first defense mechanisms that she mentioned was about fantasy. She gave the examples that a girl or a woman lost a dog, so she instantly is going to change the story in something nice, right? Like a family could found the dog or something like that. But in the other hand, she talked about sublimation, that is the fact that people take this bad situation into something positive. So she's going to take a new attitude to don't feel the pain again, like classes for dogs or something like that.
Okay, great, Carolina. Thank you so much. That was a great first try. So great. It was really good. Some things that I could say. First, your introduction was awesome. You said the lecture discusses, try to use the template. The lecture discusses two defense mechanisms, right? So then you say, first, the professor explains about how people react to different situations. I wouldn't say any of that. Remember, when you say first, the professor explains, you need to go directly to the first subtopic. So in this case, to save time, you need to go right up to the subtopics. Remember that you need to summarize a 2-minute lecture into 1 minute. So you're obviously going to leave some things behind. And that's going to be the introduction. So just tell me. First, the professor explains fantasy, right? The first mechanism, which is, maybe you can give a short definition, which is imagining a happy situation to deal with your pain. For example, and then you give the example, right? The professor mentions a woman that's lost her dog, and she might imagine a nice story for the dog. The dog is with a happy family, for example. And then you move on to the next one. So maybe that can help you save some time there. Don't mention anything from the professor's introduction. Your introduction is just going to be what you have in the question. And then you go directly to the subtopics. Okay, that's going to be one thing. And yes, careful always with the grammar, conjugating the verbs. So a woman loses a dog. Maybe just that. I think that was the only mistake made. But that will help you save some time because I noticed that you needed some more time to explain the second example. That's the only thing I would say, Carolina, but overall, it was a really good first try. We're going in the right direction. Okay, guys. Any questions so far? That was psychology. Okay. So let's now do biology. I'm going to play the lecture too. And I want you guys to take notes. Again, you will have the same topics, 2 subtopics, 2 examples. So let's hear what we have.
Listen to part of a lecture in a marine biology class.
A lot of plants and animals live near the surface of the ocean, and that means there's a lot of food near the surface because there are lots of plants and animals to eat. But if you go down to the deepest parts of the ocean, it's cold and dark, and there's not a lot living down there, so food is very scarce. So organisms that live down at these great depths have developed special adaptations to help them survive in this environment where food is so hard to find. For example, many deep-sea organisms have body features that enable them to eat prey that are larger than themselves. A good example, there's a species of eel that has an enormous mouth and a large stomach that's capable of expanding. And these unusual features allow this eel to eat prey larger than itself. That's a big advantage, because if the eel eats something big, that's a lot of food, a lot of nutrition. So the eel can go for quite a while before it has to find food again. Another helpful adaptation in some deep-sea organisms is the ability to generate light. And some organisms use that light to help them capture food. For example, there's a kind of fish called the anglerfish, and on its head, this fish has a little structure that produces light, that glows in the dark. This little structure, this little light, is positioned close to the fish's mouth. Other fish are attracted to this light. They think it's something small they can eat, so they swim straight toward it, and that brings them close enough for the anglerfish to capture them and eat them.
Okay. Now, using the examples of the eel and anglerfish, explain two types of adaptations that help animals survive in the deepest parts of the ocean. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys, so is there anyone who would like to try this one now?
Maybe I could try.
Yeah, of course, Christian. Go ahead, please.
Okay. The lecture discusses two types of adaptations that help animals survive in the deepest parts of the ocean. First, the professor explains that organisms have developed adaptations such as body features. To illustrate this, she says that there's an animal that have developed an enormous mouth and stomach that allows this animal to eat larger animals than him. Then she goes on to explain animals that generate light in the deep parts of the ocean in order to attract fishes and capture them. So these are the two adaptations that allow animals to survive in the deepest part of the ocean.
Okay, great, perfect, really. So I love the fact that you were able to identify the two subtopics and the two examples, because that's usually not as easy as it is in the other topics. In biology, it tends to be a little bit harder. But you did identify the two adaptations, the body features and the ability to generate light. And you did explain them with the examples. Normally, when you have biology, it's always going to be like this. You have two adaptations, two ways to, I don't know, to something. And the examples are always animals or plants. So it's better not to explain the adaptations with words, but with the examples, the way that you did, the way that the question says as well, right? So you just mentioned the first adaptation, or first, the professor explains that some animals have body features that enables them to, or some animals have body features that helps them, for example. And then you use the example, and you say, for example, the eel has a large mouth, a large stomach. So with the example, you will explain the definition, right? Second adaptation, the ability to generate light. For example, the anglerfish uses its light to capture food, as you said. So everything was great, really. Maybe I would just suggest that you work on the way you're summarizing things so that it's a little bit more balanced, right? You use less time for the first, more time for the second topic. But other than that, it was perfect. Really well done, Christian.
Okay, thank you.
course. Do you guys have any questions now? Okay. Then let's do another one. We've done psychology, business, and biology now. So let's see if we have something different. Here, this is the one we're gonna do. So let's listen to the lecture and then we'll do.
Listen to part of a talk in an art appreciation class.
In order for art to communicate, to appeal to the emotions or the intellect, it has to combine various visual elements to express meaning or emotion. It's really the visual components of the work, things like color, texture, shape, lines, and how these elements work together that tell us something about the work. Artists combine and manipulate these visual elements to express a message or to create a mood. Think about how a painter might use color, for example. You all know from experience that different colors appeal in different ways to the senses and can convey different meanings. An artist chooses certain colors to evoke a particular mood and make powerful statements. The color red, for example, is a strong color and can conjure up strong emotions, such as extreme joy or excitement or even anger. Blue, on the other hand, is considered a cool color. Blue colors tend to have a calming effect on viewers. Another visual element important to art is texture. By texture, I mean the surface quality or feel of the work, its smoothness or roughness or softness. Now, of course, in some types of art, the texture is physical. It can actually be touched by the fingers. But in painting, for example, texture can be visual. The way an artist paints certain areas of a painting can create the illusion of texture, an object's smoothness or roughness or softness. A rough texture can evoke stronger emotions and strength, while a smooth texture is more calming and less emotional. As I said earlier, artists often combine elements to convey a message about the work. Take a painting that, say, uses a lot of strong colors like reds and oranges and uses brush strokes that are broad, wide sweeping brush strokes that suggest a rough texture. Well, these elements together can convey a wilder, more chaotic emotion in the viewer more than in, say, a painting with tiny, smooth brush strokes and soft or pale colors. Artists use these visual effects and the senses they arouse to give meaning to their work.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the importance of visual elements in painting.
Okay, guys, that was the question. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the importance of visual elements in painting. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, guys. So, who wants to go now? Who wants to try? Does anyone?
Me?
Carolina, great.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the timer, but
Don't worry, start again.
okay. The lecture discusses the visual elements. First, the professor explained about colors, that this can be very useful in painting to show the real meaning in art. Like, for example, red. She said that red is a strong color, and blue can be a very cool color, right? And in the then she goes to explain into a texture, and she explains that is the surface is going to show a illusion of texture, right? It can be a rough texture or a smooth texture, and both of them are going to show the meaning in the painting.
Okay, great. So perfect. Maybe I would have liked to hear what they show, right? What does a smooth texture evoke? What does a rough texture evoke? What does the color red evoke? What emotions? And what does the color blue evoke, right? The blue color evokes calm, peace in the viewer. And the red color, it represents strong emotions, right? Like anger, joy, excitement. Same thing for texture, right? Soft textures or rough textures. Maybe that information was important to mention, but it was great. I mean, aside from including that information, I wouldn't really make any other comments. Careful with your reporting verbs. Try not to have them in the past. Instead of she said, tell me she says that, she explains that, I don't know, she mentions, always in the simple present. Um, Only that, to be honest. Maybe like another thing you could do in the beginning, in your introduction, you could have mentioned the lecture discusses how visual elements contribute to the meaning in paint, for example. And that way you don't have to explain in the definitions, right? First, the professor explains color, and you go directly to the example. She gives the example of the red color evoking strong emotions like joy or excitement or anger, and in contrast to the blue color that evokes calm or peace. I don't know. And then that way, maybe you can go directly to the examples, right? Only that. But it was good, Carnina. Really well done. And as you guys can see, this was art, but it's exactly the same as all of the other questions, right? You have two subtopics, two examples, your introduction. In this case, the introduction was unnecessarily long, but you shouldn't focus on that, right? Your focus is on the topics and the two examples. So, what do you guys think now? Do you have any questions about task 4 or what we did today or the speaking comments? Anything? No? Okay, guys, great. So then that's gonna be it for today's session. Tomorrow we're gonna be practicing. You guys will be answering. We'll be doing as many questions as we can. And I'm sending you guys today's daily survey. So please, if you could fill it out before you go, really appreciate it. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Then I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.
Okay, bye-bye, thank you.